Hello, my name is CJ and welcome to this tutorial. In this video, I'll be explaining to you how to run a Django application from startup. There are instances where you have an application deployed which is created using Django's framework, and then you want it to run anytime the system starts. That's to say, anytime you don't want anyone to manually run this application. Anytime this system starts, the application should run. Means it should be self-managed and then sustained. Now, you need to have your app first. After having your app, you also have to create a service. That's just the procedure. First, you create your project, your app, and after creating your project or app, what you need to do next is create a service, okay, to automatically start this specific app on your system startup. To begin with, if you are not familiar with Django, I won't be giving my details because this is supposed to help people who are already deployed apps and then need help to start this app automatically without any manual touches. To begin with, you need your app. So I will cd in a directory I made for developers only. So I'll cd into development, and then here I will stand and then make my app. To create an app in Django, you just call the Django admin, and then you use start project, and then now you pass the name of your project. So randomly, let me just call this project Anton. Now it will take a while to create your project, and when you list the contents in this directory, you realize we have Anton in it. After creating the project, we cd into Anton, and then we list our contents. So we have Anton as the app, which consists of the settings and the URL. If you are not familiar with Django, if you are already familiar with Django, you know the importance of all these files, and then I'm not going to go details, but we'll have to modify our settings.py later if we are trying to access this app, because by default it assumes that this is a development environment, and then we don't allow access from remote connections. If this goes to live, this has to be changed, and even in our case, we'll be accessing this app remotely. This is because we are connecting to the Linux server without a GUI, like a graphical user interface, okay? We can use curl to test our app is running or not. Aside that, we need to see this in a web browser, and that will be done remotely, okay? So what I'm just saying is, we'll have to modify these settings, and then just take note. It won't be any complicated. If you are not familiar with Django even, I will understand why you are watching this video. But if you are just watching out of curiosity, that's why we'll be modifying the settings to allow remote connections, allow people to connect from any host. Now, since we've seen the structure of our app, let's run our app and then see if our app will be running. So to run an app in Django, you call your Python, okay? After calling your Python, you realize we have a manager which is called manage.py. This file in our directory which is called manage.py. So we call that file. And after that, we pass the parameter run server. Now, with this command, when we hit enter, by default, Django will run using our local host address and also run this app on a port 8000. Now, this is to emphasize that in Linux, okay, ports starting from 2000 are ports you can run without any permission. But if you want to run your app, or if you want to run anything through port below that range, you will have to be a sudo user. That's like an admin user. And Django is assuming that I don't want to break because you are not a super user. As far as you are a user and you are able to create your app you want to run, automatically I'll run it using your local IP address, which everyone has access to as far as they are logged into the system. And also I'll use a port which knows that no matter what, anyone can use it, unless the port is already being used. So let me just hit enter and let's see what happens. After hitting enter, now there's an error, okay? It says error, that port is already in use. So meaning there's an app that is already using this port, or there's a service that's already using this port, okay? So our app can communicate through this port. Now, we also have some message from Django which says you have 8 unapplied migrations. Okay, so if you are not familiar with Django, anything you run with Django has to do with migrations, okay? And because we are not actually working on an app, we're just working on an app working, okay? Like, we are trying to make the foundation. We are not making the building, okay? This migrations here talks about the roofing sheet, You have to make sure your roofing sheet you use are in place. Other stuff like the furniture in the house, everything. But what we are trying to do right now is just make the foundation stand. After that, we talk about the furniture, the TV, everything we use to stock into our finished building. So we shouldn't really focus on the migration. This is an error, all right? This is something I'll consider as a warning, not like an error. It's just a warning because it's saying your project may not work properly until you apply the migrations for apps. That makes sense, right? Your house won't be comfortable after you are done building, but your house will stand. If you don't have a bed and a chair and a TV set in your house, okay, a TV set is secondary. Let's say a bed, a chair. Like, how are you going to live in your house? Okay, so, but once you don't have that, we'll run. We'll just let your house be standing. That's what it's trying to say. So, since we know that the port 800 is already in use, even though we didn't specify a port, it's trying to use the 8,000. So let's think of another port. Let's say 7,000, okay? But to specify a port, we need to specify our IP address, okay? And this is the cool thing. If you don't know the IP address of this server, okay, and then you want to actually run Django on this server without specifying the IP address. So we have loopback addresses, and this is the differences, okay? So we have a base loopback address that is 0.0.0.0. If you understand networking, okay, if you run an app on this address, any computer, like any remote computer that is trying to access this app using the IP address that it can communicate to this server, okay, it will get that access. Okay, now let me explain you the story. So we can have this server. This is a single server, right? Having like 4 nodes, or let's just use 2 nodes, not to be that the confusion. So if you understand networking, okay, we have something we call like IP addressing. Okay, so maybe this server has 2 nodes. Node 1 is connected to network A, and node 2 is connected to network B, respectively. Okay, so in this case, if we use the IP address of node 1, clients from node 2, network 2, cannot access our application. Okay, because when they try to access it, there's no app running with that IP address. So yes, you can't get any response. You won't be fed with anything. If this app is also running with the IP address from node 2, any client from node 1 will not be able to access this. Okay, now to make the flexibility, it's good to run it with a base IP, which is 0.0.0.0. In this case, any device that can communicate to our server, okay, when they make a request to the server's IP address they can communicate with and the specified port number, they get a positive response as they're supposed to get. So yes, that's more of a networking thing, but I'm just chipping in for people to understand why I'm using 0.0.0. Now, as I said initially, after specifying your IP address, you need to specify your port number. To do that, you bring a column and then the port number. So since our port 8,000 is occupied, let's try 7,000 and see. So this is port 7,000 and we hit enter. Now you realize we still have our warning telling us our migration, but our server is up and running, and it says if you want to quit the server, we should just press Ctrl+C. Now let me try Ctrl+C and our server is gone. Now if I repeat the same command, you notice that our server is up and running. So I said we need to test this server locally, this app locally, okay? So now let me see if I have curl installed. Okay, I don't have curl installed. So sorry, if I had curl installed, there's a way I could actually test and then make sure this is running. But since curl is not installed, let me fire up a web browser, okay? Now this is like a web browser that we are going to use for testing. And this web browser, we are assuming, like it's not assuming, we are connecting remotely because this server is not my host. Okay, this is a server I'm connected to remotely using SSH. Okay, and then my host is seen as a remote guy. So yeah, that's the thing. When we try connecting with my host, we'll definitely have some hindrances. So before we can connect to this server, I told you to connect to this server, this app, you need the IP address and the port number. Here's the case, we are on the same network, but we have to know the IP address, right? So in Linux, you just pass IP-BR and then ADDR. And then it tells you that this is your loopback address, okay? Now this is 127.0.0.1 and then that's valid. Now this is the network we are connected to. That's the ETH0 and it's up. And this over here is the IP address. Okay, this is the IP address. The /20 is like the subnet. Now let me just copy this. This has been copied. If I paste this in my browser, okay, and I hit enter, this should give me connection refuse because by default my browser is trying to access this server from port 80. If you understand how websites work, your request go through port 80 or 8080 when it is like HTTPS. Now we are just accessing using HTTP, which is not secure. So by default, it's trying to use port 80 if we don't specify a port. But we need to specify our port, right? And we are saying our port is on port 700, right? Let me just clear this screen. So we are saying our port is on port 700. If yes, so we are saying our port is on port 700, right? So let's just specify this and go add our port number. So column 700, 7,000, sorry. Still, I think we'll get a connection refuse because fine, port 7,000 is free, okay? But the thing is, there's nothing running on it. So yes, I'm refusing you because there's nothing running on this port, and that's just valid. Now let's run our app. Hitting enter to run our app, we have the same message we had earlier on, telling us we have unapplied migrations, which we are not really concerned about right now. But the positive thing is our development server is running, and this is the location where it's running at. If we try to access this 0.0 from our remote host, no, it won't work because it will also be referring to itself. So we have the IP address now, we have the port number. Let's just refresh this page again, and then we have a positive message, which is not positive. So as I was telling you, you can access the Django apps by default from a remote host, okay, because of security purpose, because it's assumed this is on development, okay, and development features are not supposed to be accessed remotely, and that's accurate 100%. I agree with that. But the thing here is we're actually testing, and we need to test this remotely, so we have to kill our app. Now we can either kill our app or we can leave our app running. So I told you I open another shell over here, okay, and this shell is supposed to help this. This is connection to the same server, just because I'm using a Windows terminal, and then I have option to have multiple tabs, okay. So that's the thing. Now I'm connected to the same server, and then our app is in Anton, right? So when we get to Anton, we have it in our settings. We have to cd into Anton again, and then we list the contents. You realize we have settings.py. So you use your text editor you use on Linux based on your preference. Some people use vim, some use nano. I use nano, okay. So I'll just nano my settings.py, and you notice that when we come down to a line, there's a line over here that says allowed host, and then there's nothing in this list, okay. This is a list. Now if I put the IP address of my remote client, assuming the remote client we are using is like 192.126.0. something like that, only this host will be allowed to access it remotely, okay. So this is very effective for security purpose. Now you can add more addresses to this list, and it goes, okay. But the thing is, let's not complicate stars. We just want it to be free for everyone for now. So you just put star into this, okay. I think this is either star or asterisk, and then this says that allowed every host, okay. So we save our app, we save our settings, control O with nano, and then control X to exit. Now when we come back to our running project, you realize that when the file has been changed, this system reloads automatically, okay. It reloads automatically, and when we come to our browser and we refresh, we should get a successful message, okay. Now it says the Django is successful, the install works successfully, congratulations. So now our app is up and running, okay, and that's positive. Now the issue is if we close this app this way, okay, assuming our system reboot and this app is not running, when a client comes access the app, they'll just call you, the developer or someone who deployed the app, and say, look, your app is not working again. And then it's all because maybe the server restarted, there's power outage. So what we are trying to do is make this guy stand alone, okay, that if this app is not working, it will be an error like the error we had earlier on, that disallowed host. It will either be an error, but there should be no circumstance where this app will not be running. And this is where services come in, okay. So in Linux we have daemons, okay. These daemons are like services. It's not only in Linux, in computing, these daemons are like services. They are like slaves, not necessarily slaves, but they are staffs that run behind and make sure things are in order, okay. So we can create a service. Instead of using the daemon, it will be much confusing, but let's call them service, like they are workers. So we will create a service, and the job of this service is anytime our server starts, okay, we don't want to run this app manually, but anytime the server starts, so like anytime the server starts, we want this app to run on its own. And even if it fails to run, we want it to keep trying until there's a success, okay. So assuming there's an error message, okay, like the disallowed host message, and then this app is running perfectly, but there's an error. Okay, we just modify the file. We don't have to restart the service. This service should be self-sufficient. Like, it should be able to start on its own without anyone. Immediately it's deployed, it should work 100%. And that's what we're coming to do right now. To do that, we need to create a service. And first, creating a service in Linux. If you understand Linux and you understand like programming, okay, what everything in Linux runs with files. Okay, everything is in configuration, even in computing, everything, unless a Windows that has registry and then other OS that have like their stuff stored in something like a database for. But in Linux, all configurations are stored in files, and that makes it very flexible for anyone with the knowledge to make modifications. First, we create a file. Okay, we have to create the file in etc systemd and then system. Now, this is where we have to create the file. So the command we use to create the file is touch, and this is the part. So we use the tool called touch. Let me just clear this screen and then go back to top. I actually enjoy it when everything is cleared on the screen. So first, we use the touch tool to create a file. What touch does is create a file. Okay, so you just do touch and then file name. So for instance, let me read this is the content set. You realize we have one directory, two files. One is a DB file and one is the manager. Okay, now if I just do touch and then I pass like file name and I list the contents again, you realize we have a new file called file name. So the work of touch is creating a file. Okay, now we want to create what touch takes is like the tool, okay, that invokes the action, the path slash file name, and then if there's an extension, the extension. Okay, so this is how touch works. Now we are not going to create this file over here because service files are supposed to be organized. Okay, and in this case we have to organize this in an ideal location where anyone who comes to take over this system should actually don't go through the hassle of looking at the service and finding where it is running from. Like, let's all just take it this way. It's ideal to have a common sense. Okay, like we all know that our services are stored in this container. So when a different administrator comes to take over from the past administrator, they don't have to be looking through a lot to find where they can locate files. You just know that, okay, let me go to this directory. Services are supposed to be there. I mean, this is not like a requirement. Okay, since Linux everything are running from file, I can just leave the service file in this same directory and everything will run fine. But it's ideal that we have a common sense. Okay, because if we have 10 apps and everybody is deploying their apps, creating their services separately, you have to go through everybody's location to find their services. That's why it's good to have a common sense. Okay, so we'll invoke our touch and we'll just put our service in systemd system. This is where most services are kept in Linux, and then the name will be like Anton dot, we pass extension and we'll just call this extension service. Now if we try to pass this file, we'll get an error. Okay, maybe or maybe not, because I think I modified my user to have some sudo perm access. Okay, but let's just try and see if it doesn't. Now it says touch cannot touch, like permission is denied. Okay, this says touch cannot touch, and then our file, and then it says permission is denied, which means we don't have the permission. Touch is not giving us the permission. Okay, like we don't have access to create a file in this specific directory. You notice that when we try to touch our first file over here, there was no error because we actually have access. We created this directory, but this directory was created by the system. Okay, the root, and then in this case our root doesn't give anyone permission to write into this directory. So to do that, we just receive the root, we just repeat the same command, and then here we pass sudo. Sudo is like super, like sudo is like superpower, like the god in this server. Okay, so when I say sudo kick this, okay, sudo kick this guy, okay, this guy doesn't have an option than to be kicked because sudo is saying I'm kicking you. Sudo is like the superpower. Okay, so when you pass sudo, normally sudo also asks you for authentication. Okay, sudo asks you that, okay, fine, you're asking me to do this task. Okay, why should I give you clearance? And you say, look, I know your heart, and your heart is your password, so take your password. I just give it its heart, and then fine, sudo is done. But if I try this, okay, let's say I try to create this file, and oh, sorry, the file has been created just because I have So this is one flaw about sudo. Okay, after using sudo, what's happening is that it's saying, okay, you have key to do whatever, but I was expecting this to actually take me out after creating. Every time I need a sudo access. Okay, and this is why this is happening this way, because I've actually given my user, I've added my user to the sudo group. Okay, so just authenticate first, give us a sudo password, and then after giving us a password, continue your work. But if it's a user that doesn't have sudo access, anytime you run sudo, it will ask you for password, and when you input a wrong password, it will report a message to the sudo group. Okay, and then yes, that's it. The sudo group will know that this user tried to run something using your powers, but it didn't have access. So we are telling you this is what it was trying to run at this specific time of the day. So follow up and find out what's happening. Now, since we don't need that file, the second file we just created, we just repeat same command, and then we use the remove to remove this file. Now, if we list the contents in etc systemd, you notice one thing. We have our new file over here called, we should have our anton.service. Yes, we have our file here called anton.service, and that is our target file. But this file can't be empty, right? So now after creating our app service file, our service file, okay, so let's just open it and see what this file is supposed to entail. So I'll just go again, sudo, and then nano, we go etc system, and then our service name we created is anton.service. Now this is what the file is supposed to contain. Okay, so you are supposed to populate that file with these details. Like we have 3 groups in this file. The first is the unit, second is the service, and the third is the install. Now the unit is basically the direction of the app, details of the app. Okay, like the app name, the target of what this app is targeting, and the whole lot. Since this is just to make our Django run, we need to pass the necessary parameters, okay, like variable values, and we need to describe our app. Okay, so let's just give our app a descriptive name. Like our app already is called Anton, right? So we just say Anton, and then after is this app is supposed to target the network. Okay, so this means when the server starts, okay, if the network service is not running, this app will not run. So this app relies on the network. And if this app doesn't run, anytime the network is up, this app will run. And then that's it. This service will run, and then our app will be on. Now, the service, you have to, in the service category, we have to specify which user is allowed to run this service, and then which group, okay, user group. So now, let me tell you something. This is where there's an issue. If we limit this user to the www-data user, okay, if this requires some sudo executions, there will be an issue because this app is not running as a sudo. So you can actually run this app also as a root user. You just change the name like user over here and put root. Okay. Now we have our group, which is not necessary, but you can add a group for extra permission. Okay. What's also important over here is the working directory. Okay. The working directory here should be the folder where your app is. And if you come to our app over here, we're already in the app directory. If you type print, if you print the working directory, you notice we have our path. This is the absolute path. It's not like you just path any funny path. This is the absolute path we need to pass into this variable as the value, the working directory. And after that, when we are running this service, okay, what do? We first of all call Python, right? And then we call the run server, the manager.py. Then we call the run server, we pass our IP address, and then we also pass our port number. Okay, now this is excellent. This is the same thing we have to execute on start over here. But the thing is, we don't have Python sitting here. Okay, this Python tray is an alias to the actual Python. And to know where Python tray is coming from, you just type which and then Python. So it will tell you that this is the location of Python. So anytime you actually execute Python, okay, Python tray, this is what's happening. It's executing this whole thing in your line, like user bin Python tray, and this is where it's called. This tool is what it's calling for to run Python. Our app might not know that where I'm standing, this is the alias for Python or not. And to just take that away, we pass the full path of Python over here to call our Python. And after calling our Python, we call our manager.py, our run server, and then we pass our IP address and the port number. Okay. And who can install these services? We're just saying the target is all users. So after running, you just exit. After running, you just save and then exit. Now our service has been created. Okay. After creating our service, we have to enable this service. because creating a service does not enable it. Now, this is why I told you putting your files in one container is necessary. So if we reload our daemons, okay, when we reload all our daemons, we will look at this inside this directory, etc system d system. It will look inside this directory, and then all files that end with .service, it will initialize those files, okay, and add them to like possible services that will run. Now, so let's do that. You just pass sudo systemctl, and then we do like daemon reload. Okay, this command should reload all the daemons, and then it will consider our service, our Anton.service file as a service. Now, after considering it, this service has to be enabled. Okay, we have to enable this service. If not, service has been created but it's not enabled. Enable it creates a link for other users. So we just come and then we say we pass sudo again. We have to run this as sudo systemctl, and then we say enable, and then what is our service name? Anton.service. Okay, now when we click enter, you realize it will create a symbolic link for this service in a directory called etc. So that's the thing. The thing is, this is a shortcut to run this service, and that is very necessary for Linux. Now, after running this, we also after enabling it, we then start the service. Okay, so we just say the same command. We repeat the same command, but instead of enable, we change this to start, and then our service is up and running. We can repeat this command, change the start to status to see the status of our service, and you can see that yes, it's active and running, and it's being loaded from this file, and then yes, everything is okay. There's no error, waiting for file change. Fine, that means our app is up and running. Now, just a minute, if we come back to our browser and we refresh, you notice that our app is up and running. Now, if we want to see the effective of this, let's just, we have exited from this, right? The app is running without any Python modification. Now let's restart this server and then see something. So server is rebooting. Let me just ping it and then let's wait. Let me just ping it and then we wait for a response. We ping -t and then we wait for a response. If we start getting a reply, that means our server is up and running. Okay, and that's the thing, because I'm running this from a virtual machine, there could be a possibility of IP address change. So let's connect to, this is our virtual machine I'm running this from. Let's wait for it to initialize and let's see. It's still saying destination is unreachable, which we actually understand why. Now destination is reachable. It means our server is up and running. Now I've closed the virtual machine. It's not like closing it shuts it down. It just closes it and run it in the system, and then we will SSH into this server again, providing our password. So you notice that we just SSH in without running the application. If we should refresh, our app will still run because this app just started automatically from the background. Okay, so this is how we go about it, and then this is how it's supposed to be. Now just for a review, this will just be like how our process look like in conclusion. We create our app, create the service, modify the service to include our data, and then boom, we are done. So guys, thanks for watching this video, and then you can leave your feedback in the comment, and if there's anything, yes, thank you very much for your time. Have a wonderful day.